consumer debt issues, but it turns out when you start looking at the use of consumer debt, particularly across people, you very clearly come to see that there are age-related patterns, and moreover patterns that don't work to the advantage of older folks. Just to give a little bit of context, and we heard some of this morning from Linda in a different way, older households do have complex financial balance sheets. For the most recent survey, Consumer Finances, the median net worth for households with heads between 65 and 74 is $232,000. Now, that may sound high to some people. That's including housing wealth, not including defined benefit pensions. But it's really perhaps not quite enough or a lot to run one's retirement with, although I'm afraid it probably is enough to attract the attention of financial scam artists. On the liability side, and this is news to us when we started this, about 2/3 of households with heads in that same age range have some kind of debt, about 42% of them having housing debt, 29% installment loans, and about 1/3 credit card balances. And one might think at this stage in life that perhaps those numbers would and should be smaller, but nonetheless, there they are, and these households have to try to manage this. So I think we're all agreed that retirement savings and debt management are critical to well-being, but as we've also heard already this morning, we'll hear again, many older adults aren't in good positions to manage their finances or even to delegate that management. So today, and I will try to be brief, I want to first talk a little bit about some documentation of age-related difficulties, in particular in debt management, discuss some potential regulatory responses. I work for a regulator. I don't do regulation myself, but at least that's the issue I thought about. And finally, highlight some of the outstanding questions, including the potential role for insights from behavioral economics in devising policies. So first, actually, some of my work has already been done for me. Jason very kindly and unbeknownst to me already talked a little bit about this paper, The Age of Reason, that I wrote with Sumit Agarwal, Zabby Gubex, and David Leibson. We came to this paper looking for different reasons at people's financial debt choices and finding that there was this age-related pattern that persisted despite our abilities to try to eliminate it. So effectively, there's a U-shaped pattern of fees and interest rates where middle-aged adults borrow at lower interest rates and pay fewer fees relative to older and younger adults. And that's true controlling for borrower credit quality, which actually tends to rise with age, and other factors, both specific to markets and more generally, that we thought might explain what's going on. So you actually saw an example earlier of the so-called eureka moment. Here's a different example with home equity loans, and perhaps this is, hopefully the numbers are visible to people at the bottom, but essentially controlling for a bunch of other factors. This is a plot of the residual fitted value by age for home equity loans and lines of credit for interest rates, and you can see a very clear age pattern. And here we cut it off at age 80 because the data set gets sparser. This is from a major financial institution after that age, but you can see that older and younger adults appear to be at a relative disadvantage. And so we found out across these 10 different domains, on average, fee and interest payments are minimized around age 53, which I now found out a few minutes ago from Nini's excellent presentation is the average retirement age in China. So I guess it's good they start out from a good place, but the prospects of the future perhaps aren't quite as good. We don't find evidence that it's really selection. That is, it's not that these borrowers are particularly bad lot in some way, or it's not that it's cohort effects, that is, it's not that it's just depression babies or other people doing this. Our leading explanation, which comes as a visual explanation, actually fits in well with some of the topics discussed earlier. We've already saw that experience rises with age. That's sometimes called crystallized or related to crystallized intelligence. Analytical reasoning skills decline, or so-called fluid intelligence declines. And I was pleased to see in one of Jason's charts, well, not pleased, but relieved that's consistent with this, if perhaps the experience doesn't rise quite as fast as the analytical reasoning skills decline, that way you can get an inverse U shape in performance. So relatively younger people have high fluid intelligence skills, but they don't know what they don't know and really aren't able to make good use of that. And older adults may have accumulated much wisdom. I believe that is linear in society as a whole, but their abilities to use it may be falling. So given that we have this problem, and this is a problem we also see in consumer asset markets, a natural question, at least for someone who works for the government, is what are regulatory responses? I list 9 frameworks here. In the interest of time, I won't go through all of them. And I have them in rough order of increasing paternalism, which I think is an issue to think about here. How paternalistic do we want to be? And also raise some related difficulties. And to preview the end finding, we didn't really find an optimal choice. So first is this laissez-faire, do nothing. And I think we're all sort of agreed that's highly problematic. The second is maybe to improve disclosure, and there are various techniques involving framing that one can do to make that even more effective. Unfortunately, there's really scant evidence that it in fact improves decision making. It can in some domains, but it's not as helpful as you would like. Third is a somewhat more libertarian paternalism, which you might think of as defaults and other nudges. So Sunstein and Thaler have really pushed this, as you may know of. And that works when the person agrees with the nudge and isn't being nudged in the other direction. You might think there are different parties involved in these areas who might push you in a different way. Fourth, I guess maybe I will go through all of them. I don't have time. Is perhaps you can have the equivalent of a financial driving license. Now, I'm not sure older adults are very happy about having to be retested for actual motor vehicle driving, so this may not be very popular, having this equivalent. And in designing such a test, I think would be challenging, although it perhaps could be done. Fifth, and this is something the CFPB has made quite a bit of progress on recently, is having enhanced fiduciary duty for financial product sellers. I think what remains to be seen is how costly this is administratively. Six, one might think of having a financial advance directive in the same way you'd have a medical advance directive. And I think that is good in getting family members involved more in such topics, and they should be involved more. But still, I think family members can be problematic fiduciaries. What the first example that occurred to us is the example of King Lear. So I think there were cases or lots of murder mysteries, but there's probably better data on this as well, in cases where family members may disagree with the older adult on how to run the finances. Seventh, one might specify a safe harbor for portions of assets. Now the problem is this restricts individual choice, and it creates potential for political manipulation of the asset menu. If you designate some assets as safe harbor assets, you'll have lots of organizations who want to provide those assets. Eighth is presumed regulatory approval of financial products, which we thought was comparable to FDA regulation of dietary supplements. And the regulator might have difficulty in developing guidelines, which could vary with investor age. And the ninth, and perhaps most restrictive, is have required regulatory approval of various financial products. And again, I think there are issues with the review process. So we ended up, when we were thinking about this, being a little negative, but given some discussion this morning, I was actually a little more positive about this. I think there are a number of, which I'll come to in a little bit, I think there are some outstanding questions. One is just documenting how important are losses from poor financial decision making. Now, what I documented already was, although it's costly, it actually understates the true cost. There's been lots of discussion already about scams and other fraud for aging, and that really is potentially catastrophic. Second, we've already heard about how much do people anticipate or recognize their own cognitive decline. I think some of Jason's slides suggest that people's self-evaluation is unfortunately not very good. Third, to what extent can third parties help? I think it is probably a net helpful to have family involved, but that is still, I think, somewhat can be problematic. There may be some differences in maybe some agency problems involved there, differences in agendas. Finally, what roles can insights from behavioral economics play? So I think I touched on this earlier. Framing the problem, that's how you present it, really matters. That's a result long known to cognitive psychologists, and economists have only more recently caught up to that. I think that's helpful, although disclosure remains problematic as a potential solution. Second, as I've already mentioned, defaults or nudging are becoming an increasingly popular way of solving such problems. So many companies have you opt into their 401k program, for example. That appears to have actually raised saving rates. In cases where the default is close to what the person would have chosen, they work. In cases where it doesn't, they don't work. And so there's an issue about how to do that. Finally, last but not least, is financial education. So I think the research on this, in my view, has shown that financial education matters a lot for making good choices. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have high levels of financial literacy. And even more unfortunately, we aren't really sure how to best do it. Targeted interventions in financial literacy have had less than stellar effects. My one bit of optimism that's not on the slide I'll conclude with, though, is I hear more about these fascinating developments, like being able to figure out from the ATM machine camera, getting signs of onset dementia. I'm a little more encouraged there may be technological solutions that can help people in ways that perhaps are less paternalistic, and at least to alert them that, hey, something's going on, you should think about it. Okay, let me stop here, and thank you very much.